Welcome once again to another edition of Tax Watch, brought to you by the concerned taxpayers of Duval County and in cooperation with Comcast Television. We always like to thank Comcast for making this time available to us so that we can talk to you about how local government uses your tax dollars, how the city council, the mayor and administration take your money and then use it to provide you services or give to others to help them compete with other businesses, what we call corporate welfare, which is one of the subjects we're going to talk about today. My name's Tony Bates. I'm going to be the host for today's show. Easy for me to say, right? I'm a past president, concerned taxpayer, and current member of the board of directors. With me to talk about such issues such as the JEDC, the stalling of the ethics issue by Council Member Bill Bishop, and then also we're going to talk about another piece of legislation sponsored by Councilman Bill Bishop, dog parks. John Winkler is here with me today. John is the current president of Concerned Taxpayers. He's also a practicing lawyer here in town. He practices civil law, tax law, and he's active in many other organizations. John, welcome, and glad to have you here with us today. Are you about ready to get started?
Well, I'm here. I'm ready. I'm here. Let's go.
Well, the first thing today we're going to talk about is the JEDC. We've got some headlines we want to show you. You heard that the Jacksonville Economic Division and Commission was going to be disbanded, and you'll see it says Task Force to Scrutinize JED City Council is also dig deeper in wake of critical 207-210 audit. We talked to you about the audit of JEDC in the past. We're going to talk about it more extensively today. It says city government oversight is far too timid, that we haven't looked at what this organization does, and no, corporate welfare needs oversight. Audit finds that agency didn't adequately monitor how tax money was spent. Audit says the city slackers let cash slip away, left to do job providing economic incentives. Jacksonville Commission didn't provide oversight. All these things complaining about how your tax money and tax dollars have been wasted, and without any oversight of how they were being spent. Then you see the final headline that says, ooh, bill to end JEDC. Well, that's what we were told the mayor and all was going to do, was happen. JEDC was going to be dissolved. Well, then the next thing, what do we see? We see, pops up, and you'll see on your screen a big chart that shows it never went anywhere. The only thing that disappeared, what changed, was the letters JEDC. It is now only EDC.
But Tony, that's a 25% savings right there.
Well, yes, but you see this big elaborate structure now? This is what it has morphed into. You see, it's gone nowhere, and it's going to be much huger monstrosity than what it is and was in the past. But what we're going to talk to you a little bit about today is some of those issues that were brought up in the audit. The reason that concerned taxpayers have always opposed this corporate welfare is because it is not a productive use of spending your tax dollars. To take money from you to give to a corporation to compete with other corporations. And then we find out in this audit, we worked hard for this audit for about 4 years to cause this audit to happen. We knew that these inefficiencies were going on. Government just does not spend your money as efficiently as you spend your money. And when they've got all this money, they're just not as efficient. They prove it time and time again, and here they proved it to tens of millions of dollars. And the audit only touched the surface, didn't it, John?
Oh, it just, now, there's been an accusation that there was cherry picking going on, but I think that's scarcely true. The reality is that the audit merely went through a tiny percentage of the total number of projects. And indeed, if they had gone through, and there has been some talk about going back and going through a more extensive list, I think they're going to discover even more funds that they might be able to recover the way they were able to recover over $300,000 from Winn-Dixie, which received incentives they weren't entitled to. The jobs, I think apparently those jobs that were created, that they recovered those monies for, were actually created in Georgia. And we wound up paying tax incentives to make some Georgia jobs. And that's really basically what's going on here. Is there's an old saying that no matter how you slice it, it's still baloney. We're just saying that no matter who's doing the slicing, it's still baloney. Corporate welfare really distorts what you think of as being market capitalism. The players who are able to receive the corporate welfare are playing on a slanted field. There are projects that happen or don't happen simply based upon whether or not there are tax incentives involved. And we feel that any project that isn't going to go forward for lack of distortions to the economic playing field is not a project that ought to be happening at all. If indeed the project is worth doing, it's going to be worth doing on its own merits, and not because we have a plug-in based upon brownfields, which is another field altogether, a phony form of creating false concepts of contamination based upon empowerment zones, based upon whatever assorted collection of federal, state, or local incentives. It's just a very bad road to go down. It only gets worse. I mean, and we wind up being in competition with ourselves. I mean, we've managed to create a system in Florida through the QTI program where the cities themselves are fighting against each other. You know, we could be competing with Gainesville, or competing with Tampa, or competing with Miami for the same jobs. And that's irrational, because it only lowers the ultimate tax base.
And then, see, the biggest argument they use here in Jacksonville now, because the main incentive, one of the main incentives is this QTI, Qualified Targeted Industries grant and giveaway. They pay for the number of jobs that you create. But the city's selling marketing point to the council, well, we only have to put up 20 cents out of the dollar because the state puts up the rest. The state puts up 80% of the money, we put up 20. But somehow, don't they realize this is all our tax dollars? If it's federal money, if it's state money, if it's local money, it's our tax dollars. You're still taking money out of a citizen's pocket to give to a corporation. And so those are, and the inefficiencies of all of it. We'll take, for instance, like the Everbank. What are they going to do? They're going to take a corporation and move it from one part of town to turn around and bring it into downtown Jacksonville. They're going to start pouring a whole bunch of people in this little funnel to funnel into town and pack up all the traffic. And but they left a little hole over here in one area of town, turned around and built a little mound over here in town, but the results are exactly the same. The number of jobs are exactly the same. All that's happened in the meantime is we sit around and pay a bunch of bureaucrats thousands of dollars and millions of dollars to sit around and figure out how to do this scheme. The cost of moving, all that expense is exorbitant. It didn't create a job, didn't create any wealth, didn't create any new jobs at all.
Well, one of the arguments that was made in the past when we put in a requirement for QTIs that you make a capital investment in the city, a certain number of millions of dollars, which would get added to the tax base. Now, having put that into the law, the first thing that we've done since then has been on virtually every one of these recent QTIs, there's been a waiver of that requirement, so that we wind up giving away the tax incentives, whatever the amount. Whether it's $250,000, which is what our contribution in Chase out of the $1.25 million would have been, or whether it's several $1 million for Blue Cross Blue Shield. We wind up doing that without and demanding that they actually make the capital investment. So there can be a reshuffle. As Blue Cross Blue Shield was doing, they have a subsidiary where they can simply move around the kinds of jobs and move people from one subsidiary to another and look like it's creating new jobs. And speaking of waivers, and I'm just throwing this in as an aside, we now have a budget director. We have a new requirement that you live in town. The first big job that comes up a few months after we put in the requirement for a budget director, the administration is asking the City Council to waive the requirement that he even live in the state, let alone live in Jacksonville. Why create requirements if you're just going to waive them? And the whole new plan, as you were talking about earlier, Tony, for the new EDC is to tie it in directly to the planning department so that the City Council won't be forced to look bad by doing these waivers. It'll just happen at some sort of administrative level before we even know what's going on.
Yeah, and you talk about, well, we've done away with JEDC, now it's EDC, because and you had the stigma that JEDC has grown around its name because of its performance, justly so, that we're concerned about that. But now they also had the discussion last week, well, we're going to work on downtown. Now we're going to have something, but it won't be the Downtown Development Authority because that DDA has been so discredited because it was so ineffective in what it did. So they're trying to figure out wordsmiths that might be palatable for the public to absorb, so it won't be DDA anymore. But we'll go back to just the about the capital investment that they were required to make. See, they had it at set at $10 million that you had to invest $10 million in capital improvements. That left at least a $10 million tax base. Now, they may have exempted you from having to pay those taxes for 10 years. You may not even have to start paying it. So they got away maybe for the first 10 years without even paying it. But at least later on, it was a theory that we would maybe recoup some of this money that tens of millions that we give you to come here by having this capital investment. We would collect ad valorem taxes on this property to recoup some of this. But then they started waiving this, and the reason they put the $10 million in there because corporations were coming here, getting these incentives, and maybe 2 or 3 years later leaving. And we had nothing. We had a big hole and a loss. But like you say, John, now they have started waiving this requirement, so we no longer have this capital investment they have to make to recoup our tax dollars.
No, exactly. And since the QTI program pays tax incentives over a 5-year period, the corporate job increase can take place over the 5 years, and then they can leave town. And if there's been a waiver on the capital improvement, we receive nothing. I mean, it's a net loss. People who moved here temporarily, if they moved here at all, if it's not just another one of these moving the deck chairs around.
Well, even here, see, this is the way the corporates turn around and manipulate the QTI. They say, okay, we provide the job. Okay, we gave them a job. But you would go back 6 months or a year later. Is that person still there? Well, guess what? When we look at the reports and what the audit found, no, they didn't even verify how long these people were on the job. Were they there a year later? Were they there 5 years later? Once the state comes in, and the JEDC never looked to verify, they only took the word of the state. The state would come in and look and see if the job was provided. If they were provided, well, they would pay, then the city would pay. So if we got a problem just locally about this, I'm wondering what kind of magnitude the problem can be all over the state about whether these jobs really stayed there for any substantial period of time. But then they found out, like John said, they were putting people on the payrolls as for jobs that didn't even live in Jacksonville. So all this wound up to millions and millions of dollars. And John also mentioned that that out of this, there was only a small sampling done in this audit. See, this is only 5 of hundreds of accounts or samples that they found issues with. And so we had encouraged them to do a much deeper audit, and we asked them to look at many areas of this audit, and we wanted them to look at the employee targets. We wanted to see if they could fulfill those contracts. We wanted to know what the demographics were. We wanted to know what the actual pay of the starting employee was, not the average pay of the company. And we wanted to know how long they were on the job, where they lived, and the percentage of jobs created. And also, we wanted to know how much of your tax money we had given to these corporations. We asked the council auditor to look at all these things. Well, they're going back and take a deeper look, and so we don't know where this money is going to go, John, but we just had hundreds of thousands of dollars, not hundreds of thousands, millions and millions of dollars that have been wasted through all this process.
Well, one thing that we do know is that the JEDC, when it was cutting back, it cut back on compliance officers. So they had let go 4 of their compliance officers at a time when they weren't giving out as many grants, but they had all these existing programs that they needed to check and make sure that people were doing what they were supposed to. But even in its last days, the JEDC hasn't been analyzing things properly, apparently. The Chase Manhattan QTI, which was just withdrawn by the City Council, so that's either 1.25 million or 250,000, depending on how you look at it, that the taxpayers are not going to have to give to one of the largest corporations in the world. That was withdrawn because they decided the JEDC had improperly analyzed the economic impacts that would come from it. Well, if the JEDC is incapable of analyzing the economic impacts now, after 15 years of trying to do it, have they ever been able to properly analyze it?
This problem goes back when they had 40 employees. They weren't doing this back when they can talk about, well, we've only got 20 now. Our budget's only 10 million a year. It used to be 20-something million a year. To sit around and figure out how to take money from you to give to other corporate. We're going to spend just $10 million in cost of running the organization to find out how to way to take money and give it to other people's money. What if they spent all that time in the creative process, and these corporations spent all that time saying, how can I produce a better product? How can I run this business more efficiently? No, but they spend all their time and talent and brain power sitting around the table figuring out how they can take taxpayers' money to run their business. I said it just this last week with the mayor's new group. 30 people sitting around the table, 2 hours, and we look at probably a payroll maybe at if $150, $200 an hour lawyers sitting around this table. I'm saying here's $60,000 of creative thinking, and all they're trying to do is sit around and think about how they take money out of your pocket, not how to make a corporation run more efficiently or produce a better product or expand their market, thinking about how they can take money from people to make their profit. But you wrap this up, John.
Yep.
We need to move on if we want to get into some other issues that we want to talk about.
Well, let's just move on.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, the next thing we wanted to talk to you about was the struggle that we are having with the City Council, and in particular Bill Bishop, who is chairman of the Rules Committee, with his refusal to allow the nomination of the new Ethics Compliance Oversight Director to be approved. We worked for years to try and get some ethics issues and laws and some standards put back in the charter. Finally, last year, we got that accomplished, a long struggle. Well, come to long time, we got this independence established. It's going to be in the charter. The Ethics Commission has the right to select their own Director of Ethics Compliance Oversight. Well, this nominee, Carla Miller, really is the author of all this ethics and really knows the issues about this, has been selected by the commission to be their director. But Bill Bishop, the chairman of the Rules Committee, won't allow her nomination to go forward to even be discussed. If there's some issue with her as the nominee, or if there's some issue with the Ethics Commission, the chairman, Bill Bishop, won't even allow the issue to be discussed. John, what's going on?
Well, I wish I knew, Tony. There are actually two streams going on here. The Mayor Brown's administration has taken advantage of an error in the legislation which left intact the language of the old ethics officer. Everything is that the old ethics officer is out, and we now have a director of an ethics and compliance office, which is a new position and was funded in the budget. And the old ethics officer was not funded in this year's budget. Yet for the last 5 months, none of the money has been released by the administration to the Ethics Commission in order to actually pay the salary of the director that they attempted to appoint, at least on a temporary basis. That'd be Carla Miller. In the meantime, the administration has independently appointed a lawyer from the General Counsel's office as an additional duty as the ethics officer, which was Carla Miller's old position, which has been abolished. Yet, as I say, through an oversight, remained in the ethics code, remained in our ordinance code. They knew perfectly well, the mayor's right-hand man knew perfectly well that there was no intention that we would have that kind of ethics officer. The mayor can appoint anybody he wants as a liaison or as an additional person to monitor ethics, and I wish he would, because I'm not sure what's going on in the administration. But that apparently is an attempt to exploit this leftover provision that was in the law. And everyone is now saying there's great confusion about this. We don't know what the law was intended to do. There is no confusion about this. We know exactly what the law was intended to do. Anybody who pretends otherwise or says there's an ambiguity here is just lying through his hat.
Well, what disturbs me too is they're going to have to decide this issue. There's no ambiguity in the law about this position. They're going to have to do this, and why the chairman, Bill Bishop, has conferred this. But what is even more disturbing, that all the members of the Rules Commission, the Rules Committee, won't even ask that the issue be discussed. If there's some reason and there's some contention about this issue, why not bring it up and discuss it? But the chairman, Bill Bishop, will not allow that to happen. But you got people on the Rules Committee who I just didn't understand them. People I have a lot of respect for: John Crescent-Benny, Lori Boyd, John Gaffney, Ray Holt, and Matt Schellenberg, and Clay Yarborough. And why they won't bring it up and insist that it be discussed, I do not know. And I hope that maybe you will contact these people, council people, and say, let's get on with this ethics issue and decide this issue and get it behind us for the public good. There's no use in allowing. I had one of the members of this committee tell me, well, I don't want to use my political capital. Not concerned about the public issue, but I don't want to use my political capital and upset the chairman of a committee. What kind of attitude is that about taking care of the public's business? Please contact your council people. We'll post it on our webpage, www.jackstaxpayers.org. The graphic's not going to be up here. Or contact me, Tony Bates, T-O-N-Y. And if you'd like to get on my mailing list, I'll be glad to send you out information and emails about information about this. But John, I guess that's as much as we can do. Encourage them to talk to their council people. That would be Bill Bishop, John Crescent-Benny, Lori Boyer, Gaffney, Holt, Schellenberg, and I missed one. But anyway, you look up for your Rules Committee, contact those council people, tell them to get on with appointing the...
Well, exactly. We are now 5 months into the new budget year. 5 months when, in effect, we've had no one who is actually operating the compliance side of the Ethics Commission. The Ethics Commission sits, it meets, but they don't have an actual staff member. And that's only one paid staff member. So it really makes us wonder about how serious either the administration is about having an ethics code. in the operation of local government.
And it's all up to city council. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. All they have to do is act, and all that council rules committee chairman Bill Bishop has to do is just allow it to be discussed. Just talked about. Bring the issues up. If you got issues, bring it up and talk about it, councilman. Why do you put the rest of your committee in this position? They can't comply with the wishes of the public out of respect to your position. I don't understand that. But I guess there's not much more we can say. Councilman Bishop, let the process go forward. Let the people's work be done. And then we'll move on to, oh my goodness, I'm still stuck with Councilman Bishop. The next thing we want to talk to you about is here comes Councilman Bill Bishop again with another dog park issue. Well, it's not another, it's the same dog park issue that the council was persuaded that wasn't what we needed to be spending tax dollar money for now. What is this about? The resurrection of a rejected dog park only 6 or 8 months ago.
Are you saying that dog parks are not a core governmental need?
Well, John, every dog has to have a place to go dump. What?
Well, I think our point, if we can have our picture here, is that the point at which dogs can be trained to clean up after themselves, then they can just use our regular parks.
Here it is. Councilman Bishop again brings this issue forward, thinks that you, the taxpayer, ought to pay to entertain people's dogs. He thinks, I guess, that dogs are a quality of life issue, that you have to have a dog. And somehow, here's a person that's going to have to drive to a park. He's got an automobile he's got to pay for. He's got insurance he's got to pay for. He's got gas he's got to pay for. Yeah, he can't afford to walk his dog or go to a private dog park. He's also got to pay for the dog. He's got to feed the dog. He's got to have vet bills for the dog. He's got to have a license for the dog. Yet he can't afford to walk his own dog or get to another park somewhere. I think there are about 18 dog parks. But he wants you, the taxpayers, to pay for this. Did you call it a necessity of life to have a dog?
Well, you'd rank it up with public safety.
Well, wait a minute now. If you're going to provide a park, what if I don't have a dog? Will you give me a dog? Will you provide me a dog and give me food for my dog so that I can take my dog? I ought to have a right to use this park, and I can't use this park if I don't have a dog. So maybe Mr. Bishop will give me a dog.
Well, I own cats, and I don't have a dog. So why are there no cat parks?
Oh, well, write to Councilman Bishop. Write to all your council people. Tell them you don't need to be paying for a dog park. With all laying off people, jobs being lost, houses being foreclosed on. John, we got to go. Tell us about Concerned Taxpayer. Give us some contact information and then take us out of here.
Right. www.jaxtaxpayers.org. Everything is there. If you can remember jaxtaxpayers.org, all the rest of the contact information is there. We have meetings once a month. The public is welcome to go to them, but go to jaxtaxpayers.org.
All right.